in Philadelphia at Penn, which was founded by Benjamin Franklin way back in the day. Many people don't know he was not only an instrumental founding father, but was also very civic-minded. And as Ramu was saying, really start locally with your solutions, and that really sort of epitomizes a lot of Ben Franklin. So before he became Ben Franklin that we know from the history books, he was very active solutions problem solver here in the Philadelphia region. So I think there's a lot we can learn from him. This, I don't want to make this a history lesson. I love history, but this is really about how Franklin, applies to 2023. And I think Ramu and Ben Franklin have not met, obviously, but I think they're a little bit kindred spirits with the solutions mindset. So I really love Ramu's solutions model, right? So let's go through and see what Ben Franklin can teach us. And I know we've been sitting for a while, so I'll try to go fast so we can get to the questions. All right, here we go. Slide. Yes. So well done. Ben Franklin, as you know, had probably he was the original quote master of America. So he had his Farmer's Almanac and had hundreds of early to bed, early to, that one, early to rise, right? That. Another one, well done is better than well said. So I think this is a nice motto for your next 2 weeks, right? It's the doing, right? There'll be a lot of talking, but also the doing. So let's focus on the doing while we're here, as Ren would like that. We are on Market Street in Philadelphia here at Drexel, and we're at the western end of the city. Ben Franklin arrived down on the Delaware River in 1717 as a young man, and it was a very different city, but he was right here on Market Street. So we're sort of all living in the legacy of Ben Franklin. And when he arrived here, it was a very different place, as you can imagine. And in many ways, he helped to not only invent Philadelphia, but invent the modern world. And I'll take you through some of how he impacted things. And of course, there he is later in life. And the three topics we're going to go over is his art of reinvention. And Medard asked yesterday, and I was thinking about this, where do you want to be in 5 years, right? It was sort of an interesting question. And there was a high school student who came on. He said, well, I'm just a sophomore, and I'm trying to imagine where will I be in 5 years? Will I be in college, that kind of thing? And it struck me, and I'm at an age now where I can share a little gem of wisdom with everybody. At every stage in your life, you're always trying to imagine the next 5 years. Like, you never quite know, right? So it's always a little bit of, 5 years is an interesting time frame. Like, how will the world be? How will I be? Where will I live? And Franklin continually reinvented himself throughout his life. And I think we'll go through that a little bit, but that's a great lesson. Art of design science. Ben Franklin was maybe America's original inventor and solutions architect, if you will. And I think all of the stuff that Medard and the design science lab you'll go through here, you'll see echoes of that in Ben Franklin's own life. And last but not least, Franklin was the original American social networker. And he was just really a prodigious genius about making friends and connections everywhere he went. So I want everyone just to stop for a second and turn your attention away from all of the world's problems and just kind of look around the room and look around online. The most valuable thing about your next 2 weeks is everybody around you. Get to know them, try to become friendly as you can. Maybe you'll make some very close friends. And over the next year or 5 years, this group could be very instrumental to your success. So I really urge you to kind of take advantage of this nice little social network here. And at the end, we do have a Facebook page that we're kind of polishing up. During the COVID year, it kind of lay dormant, but lo and behold, we have 1,700 people on our Facebook page. So please do sign up for that. All right, so that's the introduction. And as I said, I worked at the Franklin Institute, which is a science museum. If you have a chance in the next 2 weeks, the people who are here on site, walk on down Market Street and turn in and have a look. You can go in for free to the lobby, and I think it's maybe like $10 or $15 to take the tour if you want. I obviously love it. We're zooming in. Little tourist map for everybody. So Drexel University there on the left, that's where we're speaking from today. You go down Market Street and then kind of hang a left, and there's the Franklin Institute. If you keep walking, probably half-hour walk, you get all the way down to the Liberty Bell and back. And, for those of you who are looking for activities here in Philadelphia, this is probably where to do it, right? This is your roadmap for tourism. But we'll keep going with Franklin here. There he is. I'm going to turn my volume up a little bit. Now, one of my jobs today, he's become so famous, they've made a marble statue of him, but he's not a marble statue kind of guy at all. And in fact, I think he would really love like all the crypto and AI. I should mention, this is a very exciting year for the lab, that you guys are the first ones to go through the lab with AI. In other words, a year ago, I gave this same talk, and there was no language model, right? There was no chat GPT where you could, ping it and get back, this giant piece of text. So we've been talking to Edmund and Madara and I and Zawari have been talking about what is AI going to mean for you all the next 2 weeks. We're not sure, but for us, it seems pretty exciting for global solutions stuff. So we're going to try to encourage you, with great power comes great responsibility. Use this AI for good during the next 2 weeks. And to that end, I kind of brought Ben here into the modern era, and I'm having trouble with my mouse. You guys see it move around up here?
We might be able to move the microphone if you don't have sound.
No, it's not the sound problem.
Okay.
It's me seeing the little cursor. Here. Sorry, guys. I wanted to click. There's a video I want to play, and I can't see the screen resolution on the. I wonder if we drag it up onto that. Okay, guys. Sorry, this is going to be one momentary break here. The monitor is, when we go to project here, it's shrinkifying my screen here. That's better. All right, and we're back. All right, everybody can hear me? You good? All right. So as I was saying, bringing Franklin here to 2023, I think he would be excited to have his portrait done. This was generated in DALL-E. So this is, create Ben Franklin as a crypto punk portrait, right? So this is Benjamin Franklin. And then what we were able to do is have him do the welcome. So if the sound is working.
Welcome to Philadelphia. I am sure you will have a great visit here in the birthplace of America. Remember, an investment in knowledge pays the best dividends.
All right, and that goes under, removes L for learning, right? So the best investment you can make is in your own learning. Now, we also have a global team here, and one of the great things about COVID is, everyone's sitting here, but everyone around the world can zoom in. Globally, we've all become Zoom experts, and that's sort of an unintended blessing of COVID, is we have people from around the world.
Bienvenue à Philadelphie. Je suis sûr que vous aurez une excellente visite ici dans le berceau de l'Amérique. N'oubliez pas qu'un investissement dans le savoir rapporte les meilleurs dividendes.
Meilleurs dividendes. Good dividends, right?
Karibu Philadelphia. Nina hakika utakuwa na ziara nzuri hapa mahali pa kuzaliwa kwa Amerika. Kumbuka, uwekezaji katika maarifa hulipa gawio bora zaidi.
What language?
Yeah, Swahili. We had some smiles in the back. Was that decipherable? Yeah. All right. How was the translation? I didn't know what he was saying. Was it good? All right. I got some thumbs up. That's good. And then last but not least.
Chào mừng đến với Philadelphia.
Tôi chắc chắn rằng bạn sẽ có một chuyến thăm tuyệt vời tại đây, nơi khai sinh ra nước Mỹ. Hãy nhớ rằng một khoản đầu tư vào kiến thức trả cổ tức tốt nhất.
And Tan, how do you do? Yeah, you got it. All right. So, and obviously we could have done more, but you know, some tremendous potential with the AI and the technology, just for sort of transcending language and global borders these days. And this does not take very long to make it. If any of you are interested, I can dive into the technology afterwards. But Ben Franklin, welcome to you in many languages to Philadelphia. And just quickly, how I wound up standing here. When I finished up high school, I got a graduation gift of this Buckminster Fuller book called Critical Path, and it was all about technology trends that were going on really, you know, in the 60s and 70s. And in it was this map of the world. It was a very interesting map of the world where none of the land masses are distorted. And I don't know if you've seen this before. It's called the Dymaxion projection. So that was kind of cool. And then I went to work at the Franklin Institute, and I saw this book here by a guy, Medard Gable. And I said, this is interesting, because the book is filled with all these maps of Buckminster Fuller. And I looked more closely, and lo and behold, Medard Gable and the World Game Institute were on Market Street, 1 block north of here. So in those days, you couldn't use your cell phone or email. I picked up the payphone and called, and I said, hello, is this Medard? And I walked down the street, and Medard was working on here's a picture, for those of you who haven't seen it, this is how the actual World Game worked back in the day. This is the giant map, and we traveled not only all over the country, but actually all around the world. Medard, I don't know how many countries we were.
But,
Dozens,
you know, with about 40 countries and a couple thousand presentations.
Okay, so 40 countries, a couple thousand presentations, and if you look closely here, this gentleman, I believe, is a younger Mr. Gable. And with him is Buckminster Fuller, you know, sort of the father of this whole world game idea. So this is how I wound up here. One of the more astounding facts about this map, and just to kind of put things in perspective here, the typical Mercator map on the left really does sort of an injustice or a distortion to the northern and southern land masses. So if you've grown up wondering, why isn't Greenland like this massive superpower? Well, Greenland isn't that big, right? And actually, neither is North America or Russia. And on the right-hand side, you get a sense of just how enormous the continent of Africa actually is. So those of you, zooming in or here from Africa, your position as a sort of just sheer size on the planet is ginormous. And you can kind of see all the other nations of the world would fit inside of Africa. And this is kind of exciting to show not only for Africa's sake, but also how a change in perspective and a different way of looking things can affect your problem solving. So one of the key things in the next 2 weeks, and this Franklin was big on this too, is like the accuracy and the fidelity of your data, right? In other words, if you operated with that map on the left, you would come up with vastly different solutions than when you have the accurate information, right? So that's a key theme for the next 2 weeks, I would say, is get your accurate view of the world to make the correct problem solving. All right, so Franklin and reinvention. So like I said before, he arrived pretty much penniless with a loaf of bread, and the first day, legend has it, the first day here, he started flirting with a woman who became his wife. We're not sure if that's true, but that's the story they like to tell. He very quickly became sort of a local media mogul and social influencer. He ran the local newspaper, was a publisher and printer, but then that was sort of one phase until about his late 30s. And then he became kind of what I term the broadband architect of America. He basically built the US postal system. In those days, that was kind of like the high-speed communications network. So he had little outposts all up and down the East Coast and the colonies, and this became very important later during the Revolution period. In the 1770s, he went over to Paris, and he became kind of this legendary American figure, and he put on this, I think it was a raccoon skin cap or something, to kind of give this notion of being a rustic philosopher from the New World, and the Parisians love this. So you can see kind of the reinvention of himself. And then last but not least, this is what you see in the history books, kind of the wise old sage, founding father. But you can see at each stage of his life, he kind of adapted to the times, right? And when he showed up on Market Street, and I don't know if I mentioned this, Philadelphia was tiny. It was like 15,000 people. It was a village by today's standards. And so he and America grew up together from that early 1700s till when he passed in 1790. And at each step of the way, Franklin kind of reinvented himself to adapt for the times, right? So that's an important thing to keep in mind, like personally, but also for every institution you're dealing with. Like the next 5 years, everybody's going to be evolving and changing, right? So this is not a static world we live in. I think Franklin really embodies that quite nicely. Along the way, he was a prolific inventor, and mentioned 10 million patents. Franklin didn't apply for patents on a lot of his inventions. He just wanted them to be in the public good. Like he supported the patent system, but didn't take out the patent. Like he did the Franklin stove, he did the bifocals, and of course the electricity, all his experiments with electricity. And his work in electricity was actually one of the key scientific breakthroughs in the 1700s, and he became known not only in the States, but over in Europe as well for his work with electricity. Just as a quick side note, and I don't know if people here will know, but which US president, the only US president to have a patent? Any guesses? This is removed, yeah.
I thought Jefferson, didn't he invent the plow?
Jefferson invented a lot, but he didn't have the patent.
Oh.
It is Lincoln, that's right, Edmund knows. Yep, Abraham Lincoln is our only president with a patent. He invented some kind of water bridge. It's hard to describe, but he did get a patent in 1849. But that we digress. But here's design science, so you can kind of see the scope, but how did he do what he did? And these next couple of things I think will serve you well during the next 2 weeks from a design science standpoint. This is another one of his little quotes. If, in terms of volatility and economics, if you ever have some extra money and you don't know what to do with it, and all of you, by being here, kind of understand this, it never hurts to just invest in your own education, right? That's a safe investment because no one can take it from you, right? So Franklin was definitely a lifelong learner, and obviously encourage all of you to go down that road. Edmund, you can't, those of you who were here last year can't answer, but anyone, 6200, this is something that happens every day to us. Any idea? 6200 what? Any guesses in the room or online? 6,200 ideas a day. We have about 6,200 thoughts a day, right? So all day long we're coming up with ideas, right? The question is, what do we do when that good idea happens? So every day you probably have one or two pretty good ideas out of the 6,200. Just it's what do you do about it? And Franklin was just really good at kind of moving forward with that. And his first step was to make some experiments. So if you have an idea, like capture it, and then try to set up some kind of little test or experiment to figure out, is this worthwhile? And he was all like, and his whole life long, he was experimenting with all kinds of different things, whether it was bifocals or a stove with the, that's the famous lightning in the middle. He made this musical harpsichord device on the left. And on the right, one of his last journeys across the Atlantic, and at this point, he is in his 80s. And the whole way over on the trip, he was dropping buoys and stuff off the side of the ship, and he basically discovered the Gulf Stream. So he just never stopped experimenting and learning, and it's really remarkable. So you take an experimental mindset with your ideas, and then equally important, capture the results. So he was a prodigious note taker and observer. So while you're here, make sure to take lots of notes. If something catches your attention, jot it down or send a text to yourself, or however you're doing your note taking, make sure to capture it. And then last but not least, and we'll get into this in the next section, but share it, tell your friends, right? And Medard has this, like everything you do here the next 2 weeks is going to be captured and produced into a book, right? That's an important part of this whole experience, is that your work here is going to be shared out and spread among other people. So, when you see the book published, take the time to send it, to your old school teacher or your mom or whoever, share that work around and be excited about it, because it's important, and you never know how that will impact other people. Now, timing, this is like I mentioned about AI, just to get a sense of where we are with the technology, and I've done other presentations here that were kind of more into the technology and the mobile, so I wanted to touch on this just a little bit. This is a really important chart that I don't think people kind of get enough attention to it, and it's left to right. It's when the different elements on the PR table were discovered, right? So in other words, when Franklin was alive, he was sort of over there on the left-hand side. Just right before he died, Lavoisier published the first 33 elements in 1789. So that's sort of in that third or fourth column. But so Franklin wasn't quite here for all the elements to be discovered, but he was kind of on the cusp. And then in the 1800s, humans really began to understand that this is kind of the working elements on our spaceship. Like, what is the stuff we have to work with here on planet Earth? That was just discovered over the last 200 years. And what that allowed for is just this remarkable, late 1800s and most of the 20th century, all of these incredible inventions, right? In other words, all of this is driven on that discovery of the basic elements and kind of the building blocks of society. As we move into the 21st century, and this chart will kind of make your head spin a little, if you kind of look at it for a little bit. On the sort of to the right, you see these are all the sort of social tools that have taken hold over the last 5 or 10 years. You see Netflix took a while to get to 100 million users, Twitter a little bit less, Facebook, Instagram. Now, the thing that we're all living through right now is that Chat GPT one. That's just, and I don't think any of us quite know yet what that means, but they went from 0 to 100 million like a rocket ship. So this thing has really taken the world by storm. And I sort of challenge all of you for the next 2 weeks. We don't know what it means for global solutions. In other words, you have it like the UN has been doing it, but I mean, it's an open territory. So you might discover something that nobody yet has thought of for how to use this Chat GPT. But it's been a remarkable climb, and I think Franklin would be pretty excited to try it out, as would Buckminster Fuller. I think Medard and I often talk about how Buckminster Fuller missed the internet by just a little bit. Like Buckminster Fuller would love the internet, as would Franklin, obviously, but I think both of them, this AI stuff is kind of remarkable. Just real quick on some mega trends. At the very bottom, the site is diamandis.com, and he's a Silicon Valley kind of entrepreneur and futurist person. As you're doing your solutions the next 2 weeks, these are all good trends to bet on, if you will. In other words, if you're trying to figure out what's going to happen in the next 5 years, you can kind of pick from these for the ingredients in your solution, if you will. Like, these are the ingredients on the shelf to put into your solution recipe. And you can kind of read through them. I don't have to read every one, but you can see some of them, like the connectivity and the cheap renewable energy, autonomous vehicles. Internet of Things, I think, has been brewing and is probably going to take off the next few years. That's where every little device and sensor can be connected. So you might, if you're out in an agricultural setting, you'll be able to have sensors like, does this particular row of corn need extra water, that kind of thing. And these sensors are going to be very cheap and inexpensive. And then your bottom left, AI is going to get smarter and smarter. Now, what I did here is I asked Mr. Franklin, I'm going to have to read it off the screen here. How would you address the issue of rural electrification in Africa, say? Answer as if you were Ben Franklin, right? And ChatGPT comes back with the answer. It was, probably 500, 700 words. very interesting. And then what I did is I had the DALL-E create Ben Franklin as a Silicon Valley tech visionary. So that's what came back. That's our AI generated picture. And I stuck it into the.
My dear friends, the issue of rural electrification in Africa calls for a multifaceted approach. Education, collaboration, innovation, entrepreneurship, and sustainability should form the pillars of our endeavors. By combining these elements, we can light up the lives of millions and pave the way for a brighter future for Africa.
All right, so thank you. Ben Franklin is here today, and I'd like to think he'd be excited, right? Like, it makes me want to clap too. And this, again, this didn't take a long time to do, but I think it's a couple pieces here, right? It's sort of the AI technology, the virtual picture technology, the lip sync technology is all coming together, and you can come up with creative ways to communicate or to share an idea. And the tools are freely available. So this, I've been playing around with it, but by no means did this require like exceptional skill or anything.
My dear friends, the issue of rural
Okay. Now, the last section, so we looked at how Franklin reinvented himself. We looked at kind of his design science mindset. And then this last section, I mentioned about the social networking. So a lot of people think Mark Zuckerberg invented social networks. And I'm here to tell you, no, social networks were here long before Mark Zuckerberg was born, right? Like people talk to each other without Facebook. So not Mark Zuckerberg. I would argue Ben Franklin is America's first social networker and prodigious social networker. And this site's modernclassics.info, and they take all these historical figures and reimagine them as a modern person. I kind of like Franklin. He sort of has this New York, business guy look about him, right? It's funny, right? But if you like this, you should go to the site. They do all kinds of other famous people and bring them into the modern day, right? And this is one of Franklin's core things: meet often with your ingenious acquaintances. And a lot of your time the next 2 weeks is going to be meeting with each other, right? And getting together and kind of sharing the ideas and working through the solutions that, as Ramu talked about. And on the left, and it's sort of an old school drawing, but Franklin would have basically like a weekly business junto club. And they'd get together and they would try to solve problems in the Philadelphia community. And along the way, he and this little team, they invented the volunteer fire company. They invented the free library system. They got together and helped fund Pennsylvania Hospital. They helped when there was military issues coming from Canada and the British. He helped raise the initial militia with this group of friends. So this meeting with his little junto, as he called it, had a profound impact not only on Philadelphia, but eventually around the planet. So Franklin was early on this idea of social networking, and a scholar at Stanford, Caroline Winterer, has gone through and mapped and read all of his letters and correspondence. There's no email back in the day, right? He sent letters, more than 20,000 letters all around the world. So he was just a tremendous communicator that way. And she mapped, you can see all the different people he wrote to back and forth across the Atlantic. So, and this is before he went over and helped kind of finance the American Revolution in France. So he'd been laying the groundwork of this global social network long before the revolution started, and had friends all over in continental Europe. And if just by way of comparison, Voltaire, probably equally famous scholar of the day, kind of parochial and isolated, right? So Franklin's network was really remarkable, probably the strongest social network of the 18th century, and that really paid off in spades when it came time for the American Revolution. But that's not our talk today. And there he is, famously in Paris. He was, I mentioned Zero with his coonskin cap, and the Parisians, they just found him fascinating in his love of social networking and communications. So a true friend is the best possession. Just real quickly, and I don't want to get too much into the social network theory, but the power of social networks, like this is, I know Medard knows Edmund, so I'm 2 degrees from Edmund, right? What's so interesting, like if I were to start smoking and I never see Edmund has a higher likelihood of smoking. Like there's ghost effects in the social network. So as you think about community change and how to affect your solution, if you can just get a few people in a community to kind of get passionate about your solution, it will impact the entire community because of these social networks. It's very powerful, and they've researched it. Like if a person 2 doors down from you is happy, you're statistically more likely to be happy. So happiness is contagious. It's like statistically proven. So likewise, depression is contagious. Like if your neighbor 2 houses down is depressed, you're statistically, and even if you never see them, this is the strange thing about these social networks, you're more likely to be depressed. So as you think about your solutions, take advantage of these social networks, not only among yourselves here in the lab, but think about how that this can be leveraged in your solution. And of course, in economics and business, these social networks are also very powerful. This is a famous Peter Thiel and Elon Musk photo from the 1990s. Both these guys, they founded PayPal, but then went on, and they call it the PayPal mafia. They went on to found dozens of companies, of course, change the scope of the technology landscape. But again, it's just an example of the power of social networks to affect change. Along those lines, I went to ChatGPT. This is another nice idea. Now with this AI, you can ask the AI, who are the top thought leaders around my problem set? Tell me who I should get in touch with. Hello, AI, who should I get in touch with? And boom, it came back. I just, again, took electrification as a list, but it just came back right away. Here's 10 key influential people who might be able to help with your solution. So in other words, a lot of times we think of AI giving us a factual answer, but it can also give us the who, right? There's the what should I do, but AI can also give you the who should I talk to. So there we have it. So go out and capture some social lightning in the next 2 weeks. That's your charge. I don't know I think we're doing well on time. And there, if you haven't done so already, whether you're playing along at home or here at the lab, please go like our Facebook page. Once upon a time, this is pre-pandemic, we would go to the United Nations. This is another era. There's sort of the pre-pandemic and now post-pandemic. We're in transition here, but hopefully we'll have a new photo of all of you outside the Drexel Dragon or something this week. If you're willing to get on our Facebook page, we'd love to get your picture up here. And then down below, please stay in touch. I'd love to do the LinkedIn with all of you, or you can email me. I have a little Twitter thing going. Do we have any Twitterers here? All right, so that's all I have for you. I'm Ben Franklin, and welcome to Philadelphia.
Thank you. Questions? So questions for Jim, put into your chat box, and hopefully Jim will be able to see the chat box and we can respond. Meanwhile, he and I are going to be exchanging computers with Edmund's help, making sure it all works.
Any questions?
Look at the chat box. Let's hope there's some in there. If not, I've got a few. Here's your piece of paper and pen. All right, we do have me up there. All right. Let me look at the chat box. Anybody, questions for Jim? You saw what the ChatGPT did with Jim using it to not just generate answers to questions like
recording in progress.
How would you how on earth would you get electricity to Africa, or food to Uganda, or to a village in Kenya or whatever it might be. There's a use, it's a very powerful, useful tool that we will be using. One of the things that happens in the lab as we get into the actual lab work is there are some templates that you'll be given every day about things that we need to do to discover where we are, where we need to be going, but also what are the options and what are alternatives and how do we implement them, what information do we need. And in that process, we'll be using ChatGPT and a few other artificial intelligence tools, as well as obviously Google and other things. All right, I've stalled enough. Anybody have any questions for Jim? Edmund?
I have a question. So Jim, you talked about the unseen forces of the global network. Do you think that there can be ways to leverage such unseen forces in a positive way? Because sometimes we don't see it, so how can we kind of manage?
Can everybody
Yeah,
hear?
I'll stand over here.
Maybe you can repeat the question
Yeah,
too.
so Edmund was asking sort of how can you leverage the social networks for good, I guess is the basic idea. And absolutely is the answer, the short answer. And a lot of community work really involved around identifying who your local leaders are going to be. And that's a key factor in any local implementation is, do you have the right people in place for the solution to work, right? So there's sort of talent identification, leadership training, and building up the right leaders for a solution. And a lot of times that can be make or break for these UN solutions, these SDGs around the world. Like we can all sit here and come up with something, but if it's not implemented locally through the existing social network, it's not going to fly. So yeah, this idea of social networking is critical for all these solutions, I would argue.
So Jim, there's a question that says, how accurate, feasible are the solutions proposed by ChatGPT? I know sometimes it isn't the most accurate, but is this, in this sphere, how well does it work?
Yeah, no, and this is about, I didn't get into it, but thank you for bringing that up. I don't know who that was, but that's a great point. And I so proceed with a little bit of caution, right? So it's not yet foolproof, but at the same time, and this is the other great thing about the Global Solutions Lab, is this is a future-oriented project the next 2 weeks. So in some sense, and I don't have the quote on the tip of my tongue, but it's basically saying there is no data about the future yet. So you can't, what you're designing, you can't have data for it yet because you haven't tried it. So even ChatGPT may or may not be helpful for giving you an accurate answer because you're leaning into the future. So in other words, we're all sort of neophytes as what could happen tomorrow, right? So ChatGPT and all, there's all the data, but data is a backward indicator. So, yes, the ChatGPT data may or may not be accurate, but in some sense, that's I don't want to say irrelevant, but that's a lesser concern in going with an experimental mindset into the future of what we make our best hypothesis, right? So, double check your data in ChatGPT, run it twice, try to confirm it elsewhere on other sites to make sure. But at the end of the day, this is a future-facing exercise, and so you have to just go out and do the experiments. Like Franklin, get out there with your kite, and you might, it can be a little scary because you might get electrified or whatever. But go do the experiment. Mm-hmm.
Okay, one other question. How do you think, this is from Ahmad, how do you think Ben Franklin would approach problems that he wasn't less known for, like world hunger or poverty? What part of his approach to research is applicable to those fields?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I would argue, so if you think back to some of his approach, it would be the experiment, right? So I'm trying to remember some of my, who was the guy who did all the genetics testing, Mendel?
Yeah.
I don't know if they were contemporaries, but I think like Franklin, if they had met each other, would have been fascinated by Mendel doing all of the, the plant testing, like that kind of thing. So I think the experimental mindset for agriculture would be key. And then the other thing is the social networking. Again, I think had Franklin had enough time and had been growing his vegetable garden in Philadelphia, I'm sure he would have started corresponding to all, to the Mendels of the age tracking down, this or that plant species and that sort of thing. So I think that it translates well, I guess is the short answer.
Any other questions that we've got? Somebody says, thank you, Jim, for that historical insight about Sir Benjamin Franklin. She loved it.
Okay.
So one of the things that's going on here has to do with history and Ben Franklin. The other person with the initials BF, who lived in Philadelphia, Buckminster Fuller, he's an example from our present day how the thinking of what we're calling design science is applicable to what it is we're doing in the lab. Ben Franklin was in his time. He applied his creative thinking to the problems of the day. There's fires in the city, so they create a fire department, as well as the University of Pennsylvania and all sorts of other responses to the problems of the day as he saw them. Buckminster Fuller was responding to the problems of his day with solutions, one of which had to do with housing humanity, not just the people of Philadelphia. But so he tried to develop, how do you mass produce housing, which was in his day a mortal sin against the architectural profession. They were interested in building one of a kind. Fuller was interested in solving the problem for all of humanity. All right, so we'll be talking more about Fuller as we go along, giving you a somewhat contemporary example of how the principles of problem solving, strategic thinking, design science can be applied to the things that we're concerned with and why we're here in this room. Are there any other questions? Baruch says, note that these large language models don't have current information, only through their training.
Yeah, I think that's another point. I think some of them now are starting to get out and search the internet as part of their sort of query practice. But yeah, the models are built at a point in time for sure. But again, this field's moving so fast that probably in the next 2 weeks there'll be some breakthrough. There'll be some new AI. So honestly, check in next Monday and see if there's some new AI tool that directly solves your problem. And like I said, I think even the internet, like the timeliness of the language models are kind of getting caught up.
Another question is, you mentioned experimenting to test a hypothesis. What methods would you suggest for testing solutions that may exceed the scale of what we're able to test in a short time?
Yeah, no, and that's so here we are in this 2-week window, right? So I think you can do it by analogy of like similar projects. I would argue to find, like projects and kind of note how did they work or not work as you come up with your solution. That is a little limitation of our quick 2-week time frame here, right? In other words, you can't really, like you can come up with your hypothesis, you don't quite have the time to then run and test it. So the best you can do is kind of try to find some similar projects and make a case. Hey, it worked in country A, we think it can work in country B.
And one of the other things that's going to show up in the methodology is, one of the questions is, what is the proof of the concept? What is the proof that is needed to move your idea, your strategy, solution forward, spread it, scale it is what is the term. And it might be to develop a prototype and test it. If it's getting electricity to a village in South America, India, or Africa, well, you want to prototype it, and does it work? And then you demonstrate that it works, and then you scale it from 1 village to 1,000 villages to 10,000. So that's part of the process, is figuring out what are the next steps. And we'll be talking a good deal more about that. While Jim is still here, I want to ask the other question here. This is Jen, who's from Vietnam. In my opinion, ChatGPT will explode in technology. After ChatGPT appeared, leading technology companies also gave similar information about their products. similar to ChatGPT. However, ChatGPT can replace some current jobs. Another way of understanding millions of people facing the risk of losing their jobs. For example, people who write articles, research information, because ChatGPT can aggregate a lot of data for a short period of time, consultants. What do you think about this?
Yeah, and this is a great question. And that's why I think that reinvention piece of Ben Franklin is so important now. Because if you think about when he landed in Philadelphia, it was this little backwater, and by the time he had lived his life, it was the colonial capital of a modern democracy almost. So I think the reinvention piece, I think we're all we have to reinvent. I love to write articles, but it could replace a lot of article writing, but maybe that gives me a chance to do something else, right? I think it's a valid point. I'm more of the optimist that people will adapt and figure out, okay, how do I use this? Not, oh, I'm going to sit back and let ChatGPT, throw me out of a job forever. So I think people are, all of us living through this are going to have to be resilient and reinvent. I think it's a sort of a global thing, but also an individual thing. And you have a good chance. You have 2 weeks here to kind of, if you don't know much about the AI, go ahead and learn, and you'll know as much as anybody by the end of 2 weeks about, at least in terms of global solutions. And there was a question in the back, yeah.
Hello, my name is Elizabeth. I want to ask about the AI, and I came to learn about it like 2 months ago through a friend back in Kenya. So, in your own opinion, would you say that this one could be the future when it comes to solutions and exploring anything that you want? Because I was amazed at how efficient it is, and you could learn a lot from it. It could do even mathematics for you. So my question is, do you think it could be the future when it comes to research?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's a short answer. Yeah, I mean,
Jim, can you repeat the question for the people who were?
Yeah, and thank you for that question. Yeah, she was saying just 2 months ago in Kenya, she saw the ChatGPT and was amazed. And it is amazing. And I think we're all amazed, like the more you use it. I don't think anybody knows yet what the impact is, right? So, but I think if you think it through, so it's a leverage and an accelerator. So I think what would have taken you in this lab 2 weeks to research, it might take you 10 minutes now to get a pretty decent outline or to test. And the other thing, you can get many ideas quickly, and then it's kind of picking out, this is the one I like, let me refine it. So I think it's going to accelerate time to idea and ideation, but also give you sort of a broader reach and get more in depth more quickly. I think at the end of the day, it still requires, I'm a big believer, there's AI and then there's HI. I'm pointing at my head for people online, like human intelligence, I think is underutilized as a whole. So that's why I was big on the social networking. I think 5 smart humans collaborating can run circles around ChatGPT. I really believe that. So don't underestimate your own ability. You're all, as Madar said in that open exercise, you've all been trained to be here. You all came here for a reason. Your experience is valuable. You don't need any special degrees or job role to plan for the future. So your idea here in the next 2 weeks could be breakthrough for the planet. We don't know, right? But that's the kind of excitement of the Solutions Lab is you can come up and use your own imagination and in conjunction with the AI to come up with something very powerful.
All right, there's one last question here. The question is, testing strategies, simulating results will be necessary to choose better strategies. Seems to be a serious roadblock. Do you have any suggestions? Just to jump in here, I think you throw out simulations. I mean, we're not talking about simulating the world. We're talking about testing in the real world, not some on the computer a simulation. I think in terms of where the lab is going, one of the challenges for your solution, your design for how to make something work in the future is good. Okay, here's the test that we want to perform out in the real world. It's not a simulation of what it is, although simulation has got uses, but we're going in a slightly different direction. But Jim, why don't you respond to this as
No,
you
no,
see
yeah,
fit?
it is a constraint. I mean, it's sort of a constraint. It is a constraint of the lab, but I don't think it stops the thought process in the sense of, you know, your solution can kind of still be validated. Like I mentioned earlier, I think you can look at other cases where success or failure of a similar idea happened. I guess I'll go back to that as kind of a touchstone. If you can find a like case that worked or similar cases that didn't work, that kind of points you in the right direction. But at the end of the day, what you do here is sort of the first piece of the puzzle, right? There's, you know, the expectation is these skills are going to go with you, you know, and be applied in other projects as well.
So I have a last question. The question is the two BFs, Ben Franklin, 1700s, Fuller in the 1900s and the 2000. What similarities between them? I mean, they weren't, one wasn't the reincarnation of the other, but they were different people, but similarities.
Yeah, no, this is a great question. And yeah, I've studied Fuller quite a bit too also. You know, I think curiosity is probably a huge common thread between both of them, right? So they were, you know, there wasn't a puzzle or a problem that didn't catch their attention in both eras, right? So, you know, you're all here because you have some curiosity about the problems of the world. Well, you know, this is the 2 weeks to really dial up the curiosity. I think both of them were kind of pragmatic in a good sense of like, is this going to work? So that's the, you know, Franklin, you know, of his many things, he invented the lightning rod along the way. Like he just was this, you know, font of different inventions. You know, Fuller the same way. Like he had the dome, he had the map. He tried a car. Different, you know, he was doing all kinds of things. So I think sort of that practical application piece. And maybe what's the third one? I think they were both very literate, and they sort of loved to sort of read and communicate. You know, there were no TED Talks for either of those guys, but I think both would have huge TED Talk audience if they were to give their TED Talk today, right? You know, so I think that communications piece would be a third one. So curiosity, pragmatism, communication. Yeah, that's good.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
It's wonderful to hear you talk. Let me get around so that I can put on the screen what we need to share, and we're going to wind up today with a minor activity. Let me just get this up so that you can all see it. I'm assuming, Edmund, that what is on my screen is also, everybody can see. All right, so this is what we've just finished. You know, Ramud and Dodoron and Jim Walker. We want to have a breakout session where we're going to put all of you people in a breakout room randomly. You won't possibly know the people unless you met them yesterday in a previous breakout room. And we want